Hello, everybody. So, I'm obviously not in the garden today. I'm actually in my kitchen in San Diego, and I have a very exciting video for you. I'm going to be planting my Christmas Amaryllis. So, right now, it is mid-November, and in all honesty, this is a little late to be planting Amaryllis. You should typically plant them 4 to 6 weeks before you want them to be in bloom. So, it's mid-November now. These will likely be in bloom by Christmas. I personally like to have my Amaryllis in bloom by, kind of early to mid-December, so I usually try to get them in the ground, or in pots, I should say, kind of late October, early November. I missed the boat a little bit on that, so these ones will be a little bit later than they are normally, but that is totally fine. You can even plant them up through, as long as the bulbs are still good, you can plant them even up through late January and have them in bloom in the spring. To me, amaryllis are really a Christmas flower, so I like them to be in bloom for the Christmas season. But anyway, I have a few different varieties here. The first one down in front is a variety called Snow White. This is a double amaryllis with just a really crisp white. That is one that I have grown every year for the last few years, and I really love that one. And then the next one is one called Merry Christmas. This is another one of my go-tos. This is a single flowering, just kind of your classic red amaryllis. When people think of amaryllis, what they're thinking of is what the Merry Christmas variety looks like. And then my next bulb is actually a 40 centimeter red bulb. So what that means is, if I take it out of its container, you can see that this bulb is much larger than my other ones. This is just a bulb that the grower has grown to be much bigger than their standard bulb. So the rest of these are 32 to 34 centimeter bulbs. This one is 40 centimeters. Now, you buy giant bulbs because you typically get some bigger flowers and more of them. These bulbs are generally a little bit more expensive than your standard amaryllis, which are about, in actuality, they're probably 2/3 the size, so quite a bit smaller. So these do run a little bit more expensive, but you get a lot more flowers out of them. And then finally, my last variety is one called First Love. This is another double variety, but this one is actually a really light pink. So I have a variety of pots here. When you're choosing a pot for an amaryllis, you want one that is about the same size as the bulb, just a little bit bigger. Amaryllis don't like to have a ton of room, so I like to give them an inch or two on every side, so that they have enough room to grow, but they're not swimming in an overly large pot. So this little footed bowl is kind of perfect for my 40 centimeter bulb. It's got some room on either side. It's big enough that it'll have an ample soil reservoir, but it's not so big that the bulb is going to be unhappy. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a couple inches in the bottom of the container. Now, I should not be doing this in my kitchen. I'm going to make a huge mess. In fact, not going to. I did already dump a small bag of potting soil onto my kitchen floor. But it's gotten dark outside, and I wanted to get these in the ground today, so this is what's happening. And hey, I guess my vacuum has got to earn its keep somehow, and today is apparently that day. So I put a couple inches down in the bottom. You can see that this bulb has quite a bit of roots on it. So the roots obviously go down, and then the crown, the neck of the bulb, this part right here, should be facing up, and then you want the soil to come about halfway up the bulb. So you don't want to bury amaryllis. That is really important. So now that I've got a couple inches of soil in there, I'm just going to backfill around the bulb. And I'm just using an all-purpose potting soil. It doesn't need to be anything special. You want to use a high-quality one, but other than that, you can really just kind of use any potting soil. This container doesn't have a drainage hole, so I will have to be very, very careful with my watering, but it does have a plastic liner to protect the bowl, so I'm just kind of making sure that I keep the soil in the liner. And I'm doing my best to center it. You're never going to notice if it's not perfectly centered, so I'm not too concerned, but I don't want it to be off to one side too bad. So I'm just packing it in here well. Amaryllis get very top heavy when they're blooming, so you want to make sure that the bulb is really well situated in there. You don't want to run the risk of the bulb falling out of the container or something like that, because the flowers are so big that they just get really heavy. Okay, so I'm filling it right up to just below the lip of the plastic liner. So you can see I've planted it a little bit with the soil line, maybe a little lower than halfway up the bulb. That is totally fine. That is just kind of dictated by, you can see this is not a very deep container. So that's about as deep as I can get it. That will be totally fine though. And then my last step is I'm going to take some of this Super Moss brand preserved moss, and I'm just going to kind of arrange it around the bulb. I don't like to see any soil, so this step is totally unnecessary and totally optional. You don't need to do this, but I think they look a little unfinished if you don't put something there. I will link this same moss that I'm using down in the description box below. You can really use anything you'd like though. I've seen people use, or in the past I have used little rocks, I've seen people use like old wine corks, just anything to help cover the soil and make it look finished. I think makes it look much nicer. But like I said, you don't need to do this step. It's purely optional. But I think it really improves the overall effect in the end. And this moss is preserved and dyed, so you don't need to worry about keeping the moss moist or anything like that. It is kind of ready to rock and roll. So now that I've gotten this first bulb planted, I'm going to go ahead and get the other bulbs planted, and then I will talk you through how I'm going to take care of these. Okay, so as you can see, I got all of the Amaryllis planted. Now, my plan originally was to put all 3 of the Merry Christmas variety here in this green container. And when I dry fit them, they fit perfectly. And last year I planted 3 in here, but this year I just could not get them in there once I had potting soil in. So I put 2 of the Merry Christmas in here, and then 1 on its own in a terracotta pot. And then everything else got its own container. I personally like the look of multiple Amaryllis in one container, so I always like to do 1 or 2 pots of more than 1. You could go, I've seen some people go crazy and do like a dozen in one larger container, or you can just plant them individually just like this. Now, to care for these, what I'm going to do is I'm going to water them in well right now, and then I'm not going to water them again until I see growth. Now, it usually is pretty quick. Within a couple of weeks, you'll see a shoot starting to come up. But like I said, I'm not going to water them again until I see that start happening. Amaryllis rot pretty easily from overwatering, and so you want to make sure that you don't do that. The other thing that you want to make sure you don't do is get water here in the crown of the plant. That can also cause them to rot, and you really just want to avoid that at all costs. So water them around the bulb, but don't water just over the top of it. And then I'm going to take and set all of these in a sunny window so that they can get some good sunshine. And then once they have gotten growing and started to bloom, then I will take and move them throughout the house, wherever they look nice. And then I'll let them bloom in the darker locations. And once they are done blooming, I'm actually going to go and put them outside. Here in San Diego, Amaryllis are hardy and you can grow them outside year-round. And then I'm just going to let them grow through the season. If I was growing these up in Spokane or in a colder winter area, I would keep them inside until it warmed up. So once we were past the point of frost, or past the last frost date, then you could go ahead and move them outside. And I recommend growing Amaryllis outside during the growing season. If you would like to keep the bulb from year to year, I find that they just do better that way than they do as houseplants. Amaryllis really like a lot of sun, and I find that it's just hard to give them enough sun inside, and they really thrive outside during the growing season. And then during the growing season, I recommend giving them a liquid fertilizer about once a month. You want to keep the bulbs with a lot of nutrients and really healthy so that you can get some nice blooms next year. And then in fall of next year, so kind of late August, September timeframe, you want to take the entire container, so you can either take the entire container or you can take the bulb out of the container and put it in a cool, dark, dry place. So if you have a basement, something like that, or a closet, anything like that is perfect. And then they need to stay in there for about 8 weeks in order to force them into dormancy, and so that you can have them bloom again for next Christmas. Amaryllis, unlike poinsettias, are relatively easy to get to last from year to year and to get to rebloom. But in all honesty, I generally just replace my bulbs. They're not that expensive. I like to try new varieties. And so I personally don't go through the hassle of forcing them into dormancy and growing them through the growing season. But if that is something that you would like to do, it is definitely super easy. But anyway, that's really all there is to Amaryllis. They are definitely a very easy plant to grow, especially if you're just going to grow them for the blooms. And I think that they add a really nice Christmas touch to the house. So anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. Please make sure you subscribe down below so that you can see more projects just like this one, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.